Captain Veltar's 3 hearts pounded against her ribs, like war drums, as she dragged herself through the twisted wreckage of what had once been Research Colony Alphanine's main corridor. The emergency lighting flickered red against the smoke, casting hellish shadows on walls painted with alien blood. Her own purple blood dripped steadily from the jagged gash across her scaled forehead, each drop hitting the deck plates with a soft plink that seemed unnaturally loud in the sudden silence. The screams had stopped exactly 10 minutes and 37 seconds ago. She knew because she'd been counting, clinging to numbers like a lifeline while her world burned around her. Somehow, the silence was infinitely worse than the chaos that had come before. At least screaming meant someone was still alive to make. The sound through a massive breach in the corridor wall. She could see the mining complex spread out below like a broken toy. The Crimson Reapers moved through the facility with methodical precision, their crimson armor gleaming under the harsh industrial lights. They weren't raiders looking for quick profit anymore. This had become something far more sinister, systematic. Execution of every living being on the colony. Veltar pressed herself against the twisted metal, watching in horror as a Reaper soldier dragged Dr. Kent from behind an overturned transport. The elderly scientist had taught her daughter xenobiology just last month. His desperate pleas echoed across the complex. Before being cut short by the distinctive whine of an energy weapon, her communicator crackled to life, startling her back to reality. Captain Veltar, this is Mining Station 7. We're reading massive hull breaches in your sector. What's your status? She keyed the device with a trembling claw. Station 7, Colony Alpha 9 is gone. Crimson Reapers, maybe 300 ships. They're not taking prisoners. Her voice cracked on the last word as another explosion rocked. The station, sending debris raining down around her. Understood, Captain. We're going dark and hoping they don't detect us. Good luck. The channel went silent, leaving her alone with the distant sound of weapons fire and the steady hiss of atmosphere bleeding into space. 300 colonists had called this place home 12 hours ago. Scientists, miners, their families. Children who had been playing in the recreation domes when the first Reaper ships dropped out of hyperspace now. Now she might be the only one left alive to tell their story, but who would listen? The Galactic Patrol had written off this entire sector years ago, declaring it too dangerous to patrol effectively. Translation: not profitable enough to risk their precious ships and crews. The nearest civilized systems were weeks away at maximum burn, and even if they cared enough to respond, they'd arrive to find nothing but floating debris and silence. Still, she had to try. Her duty as colony captain demanded it, even if that duty had become nothing more than bearing witness to genocide. With her remaining strength, she crawled toward the communications array, or what was left of it. Sparks showered from severed power conduits as she jury-rigged a connection to the emergency beacon transmitter. Her engineering training kicked in despite her injuries, muscle memory guiding her hands as she rerouted power through backup systems. Emergency beacon to any vessels in range, she whispered into the communicator, her voice barely audible over the screaming hull breach alarms. This is Captain Veltar of Research Colony Alpha 9. We are under attack by Crimson Reaper forces. Estimated 300 hostile vessels. Colony population of 300 civilians. Request immediate assistance. Please. Anyone out there. Don't let them die for nothing. The beacon fired into the cosmic dark, a desperate cry for help that would travel at light speed to anyone. Willing to listen, she didn't expect an answer. Well, she wasn't even sure she wanted one. What kind of force would be crazy enough to take on 300 Reaper ships? Static filled her earpiece for long minutes. Then something impossible happened. A voice emerged from the void cold. Controlled, speaking in the harsh consonants and clipped vowels of a language that made her blood freeze. The quarantined Deathworld tongue, the language of humanity, Alpha 9. This is Captain Jake Morrison, USS Vengeance. We're coming. For a moment, Veltar couldn't process what she'd heard. Humans hadn't left their quarantined sector in over 80 years. The Galactic Council had sealed them away after the War of Pacification, declaring them too dangerous for civilized space. Every child in the galaxy grew up on stories of human brutality, their inexplicable willingness to die for strangers, their disturbing habit of turning every conflict into total war. Captain Morrison, she managed, her voice shaking. You cannot engage. There are hundreds of their ships. This isn't a rescue mission. It's suicide. The humans' reply came without hesitation, carrying an edge that could cut steel. Ma'am, you called for help. That's exactly what you're getting. Before she could respond, the transmission cut to static. Her scanner array, damaged but still functional, suddenly lit up like a festival display. Dozens of massive energy signatures were dropping out of hyperspace. At the system's edge, their approach vectors locked directly onto Alpha-9. Wait, these weren't the scattered arrival patterns of a hastily assembled rescue force. This was a coordinated fleet insertion, executed with military precision that spoke of hours of planning and preparation. Long had they been monitoring emergency channels? How fast had they traveled to get here? As the signatures resolved. On her display, Veltar felt her 3 hearts skip in unison. 37 ships, each one broadcasting the distinctive energy signature of human military vessels. Dreadnoughts, carriers, destroyers of full battle fleet emerging from the void like ancient gods of war. The humans hadn't sent a rescue ship. To save 300 strangers, they'd sent everything they had. And somewhere in the back of her mind, terrifying thought began to form. Maybe the galaxy had quarantined the wrong species for protection. Admiral Rebecca Hayes stood like a statue of vengeance on the bridge of the UCS Reckoning, her steel-gray eyes fixed on the tactical display that painted the story of systematic murder. 63 Crimson Reaper vessels had surrounded research. Colony Alphanine, like carrion birds, their formations loose and arrogant. They weren't expecting a fight. After all, who would be crazy enough to challenge 300 pirates in the middle of nowhere? The answer was standing right here. Watching her 37-ship battle group slide into attack formation with the fluid precision of a pack of wolves, each vessel moved with deadly purpose, their captains veterans of conflicts the galaxy preferred. To forget, Reckoning herself was a Nemesis-class dreadnought, 3 kilometers of reinforced titanium and righteous fury, bristling with enough firepower to crack a small moon. Admiral Commander Lisa Brooks called from her station, her voice tight with controlled disgust as she monitored enemy communications. The pirates are broadcasting on all frequencies. They're offering to negotiate surrender terms. Hayes turned slowly, and Brooks actually took a half step back from the expression on her superior's face. The Admiral's laugh could have frozen helium. Surrender terms? How generous of them. She pulled up the colony's casualty reports on her personal display, the numbers burning themselves into her retinas. 300 civilians. Men, women, children. Scientists who had dedicated their lives to expanding the boundaries of knowledge. Miners who kept the galaxy's industries running. Families who had simply wanted to build something better in the frontier. All dead or dying while these animals, BROADCAST terms, like they were conducting a legitimate military operation. "Tell me something, Commander," Hayes said, her voice carrying across the bridge with deadly quiet. Did they offer surrender terms to Dr. Sarah Kim when they executed her in front of her 6-year-old daughter? Did they negotiate with the mining crews before spacing them? Brooks checked her display, her face pale. "No, ma'am. Intelligence reports show they killed civilians on site. No prisoners taken." Then they get the same courtesy they showed. Hayes keyed the fleet-wide tactical channel, her voice carrying to every ship in the battle group. "All vessels, this is Admiral Hayes. Weapons are free. Rules of engagement are simple: anything flying Reaper colors dies. Show them exactly why Earth stays quarantined." The first salvo lit up space like a newborn star. 37 human warships opened fire simultaneously, their coordinated barrage turning 6 Reaper vessels into expanding clouds of superheated plasma before the pirates even realized they were under attack. The Reckoning's main guns, twin particle cannons that could punch through a battleship's shields like tissue paper, spoke with voices of thunder. Each shot precisely targeted to cause maximum damage. But here's the thing about predators. They only stay confident until they meet something higher up the food chain. The remaining Reaper ships scattered like roaches when someone flicks on the kitchen lights at 2 a.m., their formations dissolving into panic as they tried to escape the systematic destruction being visited upon them. The humans pursued with mechanical precision that would have impressed a surgeon. No wasted motion, no emotional outbursts, just the methodical application of overwhelming force. Captain Jennifer Walsh's destroyer squadron herded fleeing pirates back into Admiral Hayes' kill zone. Commander Michael Chen's fighter wings picked off stragglers with the patience of cats hunting mice. This wasn't a battle, it was an execution dressed up in military tactics. "Target the command ship," Hayes ordered, watching a massive Reaper dreadnought trying to rally the survivors. "I want their leadership to understand something before they die." The Reckoning's guns swiveled with predatory grace, locking onto the enemy flagship. But instead of obliterating it immediately, Hayes opened a communication channel. The Reaper captain appeared on screen, a scarred brute whose confidence had evaporated like morning dew. "Human vessel, we surrender. We'll release any prisoners, and you already released them." Hayes cut him off, her voice colder than deep space. "Into the void. Without spacesuits." The main guns charged with an ominous hum that even the Reaper could hear through the cum. "Link. This is for Colony Alpha 9. The command ship vanished in a ball of nuclear fire, while the fleet systematically hunted down the remaining pirates. Captain Morrison's Marines were already hitting the colony surface in drop pods. There. Armored forms streaking through the atmosphere like silver meteors. These weren't ordinary soldiers. They were force recon. The kind of warriors that other militaries told stories about around campfires. Their powered armor gleamed like liquid mercury, each suit worth more than a small starship and deadlier. Then a platoon of conventional troops. Morrison himself landed first, naturally. His boots hit the colony's main deck with a metallic clang that somehow seemed to echo with finality. Behind him, 36 more pods crashed down in perfect formation, their occupants emerging like something from humanity's darkest myths. They moved through the burning structures with lethal grace. Hunting the Reapers who had thought themselves safe on the ground, the pirates discovered what every military strategist in the galaxy had learned the hard way. During the War of Pacification, humans were terrifying enough in space, but on solid ground, they became something else entirely. Something that made seasoned warriors wake up screaming. Admiral Morrison's voice crackled through the cum, professionally calm, despite the sound of gunfire in the background. Colony secured, counting 18 Reaper survivors in custody and 43 colonist survivors in the emergency bunkers. Medical teams are requested immediately. 43 out of 300. Hayes felt something cold and hard settle in her chest, but her voice remained steady. "Acknowledged, Captain. Medical frigates are already deploying. Make sure our prisoners understand they're going to live long enough to stand trial." She opened a channel to the colony's emergency frequency. "Colony Alpha 9, this is Admiral Rebecca Hayes, Terra Confederation Navy. The immediate threat has been neutralized. Prepare to receive medical assistance and evacuation support." Captain Veltar's face appeared on the main screen, her alien, features twisted with shock and something that might have been disbelief. Purple blood still trickled from the gash on her forehead, but her eyes were wide with wonder rather than pain. "Admiral Hayes, ... How? How did you get here so fast? The nearest civilized systems are weeks away. We sent that distress call only hours ago." Hayes studied the alien captain for a moment, recognizing something familiar in her expression. Was the same look she'd seen on human faces during the darkest days of Earth's history, when help had seemed impossible and hope was nothing but a cruel joke. The look of someone who had given up on rescue and was simply trying to die with dignity. "Captain Veltar, we received your distress beacon 6 hours, 14 minutes ago. The Terra Confederation fleet has been burning at maximum military thrust since the moment your transmission reached us." She paused, letting that sink in. 6 hours to cross 4 star systems, pushing their ships to the absolute limits of what human engineering could achieve. We had to break our own quarantine protocols to get here, but that was never really a question. The alien captain's jaw worked soundlessly for a moment. "But why? We're strangers to you. Your species has been isolated for decades. Why risk everything for people you've never met?" Admiral Hayes' expression hardened into something that would have made a diplomat very nervous. "Because, Captain, humans don't abandon innocent people. Not ever. Not for any reason." She glanced at the tactical display showing the last Reaper. Ship exploding in the distance. Your people called for help. That's the only authorization we needed. As the words hung in space between them, a single thought echoed through both their minds. The galaxy was about to discover that some quarantines weren't meant to keep the dangerous ones locked away. Sometimes they were meant to keep the dangerous ones contained until the moment they were truly needed. And that moment had finally arrived. News traveled through the galaxy's communication networks faster than a brush fire in dry grass. Within 72 hours, every spacefaring civilization from the core worlds to the outer rim had heard the impossible story. The quarantined Deathworlders had broken their 80-year isolation, and they were hunting pirates with the methodical efficiency of apex predators who had finally found their prey. The Galactic Trade Commission's emergency session devolved into chaos as reports flooded in from across known space. Pirate fleets that had terrorized shipping lanes for decades were simply vanishing overnight. Their strongholds reduced to floating debris and their survivors dragged away in human prison ships. The pattern was always the same: swift, overwhelming force followed by systematic investigation of every criminal operation they could find. Colonel Mike Anderson stood in the command center of the assault carrier Justice, watching his tactical display paint a picture of humanity's most ambitious military operation since the War of Pacification. Reaper Station Omega hung before them like a metallic cancer, its massive bulk hidden deep within the Kepler asteroid belt where no civilized patrol had dared venture for half a century. "Sir, we've got full sensor sweeps of the target," reported Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell, her voice tight with professional excitement. Estimated garrison of 8,000 pirates. Defensive grid includes particle cannons, missile platforms, and a fighter complement of at least 300 craft. Anderson studied the readings with the calm focus of a man who had spent 30 years turning impossible odds into routine victories. The station was a fortress built from the hulks of captured ships, welded together into a sprawling complex that could house a small city. Intelligence reports suggested it served as the Crimson Reaper's primary command center, coordinating attacks across a dozen star systems. Time to entry. 14 minutes at current approach velocity, sir. Signal the fleet. Operation cleansing. Fire is a go. Remember, we're not just taking a pirate base, we're sending a message to every criminal organization in the galaxy. Anderson's voice carried to every ship in the strike force, his words recorded for posterity. 18 minutes, people. That's how long I'm giving you to crack this nut. The assault began with a symphony of destruction that would have made classical composers weep with envy. Human ships moved through the asteroid field like dancers at a deadly ballet, their formations flowing around space rocks the size of mountains while maintaining perfect firing solutions. The station's defensive grid, designed to repel conventional attacks, found itself facing tactics that defied every rule of civilized warfare. Captain Jennifer Walsh's destroyer squadron used the asteroids themselves as weapons. A tractor. Beams hurling house-sized rocks at defensive platforms with devastating accuracy. Meanwhile, Colonel Anderson's Marines launched from stealth ships, their assault pods disguised as ordinary debris until they latched onto the station's hull like mechanical parasites. The first defensive line collapsed in 4 minutes. The second lasted barely 3. By minute 7, human forces had breached the main hull in 17 different locations. Their advance coordinated with a precision that spoke of endless training and absolute trust in their equipment and each other. "Sir," Sergeant Dana Clark's voice crackled through. Anderson's come as she led Alpha Squad through the station's commercial district. "We're finding way more than we bargained for down here. This isn't just a pirate base." Anderson frowned, checking his tactical display. "Explain, Sergeant." "Slave pens, sir. Hundreds of them. And medical facilities that—" Her voice faltered for a moment before professional training reasserted itself. "Colonel, they're harvesting organs. Sentient beings from across the galaxy, kept alive for parts. We've got trafficking networks, weapons manufacturing, drug laboratories. This is the center of a criminal empire." The revelation hit Anderson like a physical blow. The Crimson Reapers weren't just raiders looking for quick profit. They were running industrial-scale atrocities that had operated with impunity while the galaxy looked the other way. How many innocent beings had suffered and died in these chambers? While civilized governments declared this sector too dangerous to patrol, his response was immediate and absolute.
Albert.
Burn it all, Sergeant. Every facility, every laboratory, every piece of equipment they've used to hurt people. I want this place reduced to scrap metal and bad memories. Sir, what about evidence for tribunals? Anderson's laugh was sharp as broken glass. Document everything, but don't let legal procedures slow you down. These monsters have been operating for 50 years because bureaucrats were more concerned with proper paperwork than stopping atrocities. We're not making that mistake. It's a station that had terrorized shipping lanes for half a century died in. Exactly 18 minutes, its destruction broadcast live to every intelligence service in the galaxy. The message was clear. The humans weren't just fighting pirates. They were waging war against the entire criminal underworld that had flourished in the shadows of galactic civilization. Captain Veltar stood in the observation deck of the Reckoning, her 3 hearts beating in complex rhythms as she watched the tactical feeds from humanity's latest operation. Her role as liaison had given her unprecedented access to human military planning. What she'd learned challenged everything she thought she knew about the species her people had helped. Quarantine, 8 decades ago. Remarkable, she murmured, watching human forces systematically dismantle another criminal stronghold in the Vega system. Your coordination is perfect. It's like watching a single organism with 37 different bodies. Admiral Hayes joined, her at the viewport, her expression thoughtful as she studied the same displays. Captain, you asked me something during our first strategy briefing that I don't think I answered completely. You wanted to know why we risk everything for strangers. Veltar turned to face the Admiral, noting the weight of years in her eyes. And I remember your response about the quarantine protecting you from us, not the other way around. I've been thinking about that ever since. Hayes pulled up a holographic display showing trade routes throughout the galaxy, their paths marked. With incident reports, casualty statistics, and crime data spanning decades. Look at this, Captain. Really look at it. For 80 years, how many distress calls went unanswered because they came from sectors deemed too dangerous? How many civilizations learned to simply accept that some trade routes were death traps? How many families were told their loved ones were acceptable losses in the name of maintaining profitable commerce? The data was staggering. Hundreds of thousands of deaths, millions of people enslaved or worse, entire colonies abandoned because protecting them wasn't economically viable. The galaxy had learned to live with systematic brutality as long as it stayed in designated areas and didn't disrupt core world profits. Your species was quarantined because you fought total war, Veltar said slowly, understanding beginning to dawn. Because you couldn't accept limited conflicts with acceptable casualties. Admiral Hayes' smile was grim as winter on a dead world. The quarantine wasn't punishment, Captain. It was protection. For 80 years, we've watched civilized species make pragmatic decisions about acceptable levels of suffering. We've seen governments write off entire sectors because intervention was too expensive or politically complicated. She gestured to the tactical display showing freed slaves being transferred to hospital ships, their faces bearing the hollow look of beings who had given up hope of rescue. Your distress call from Alphanine wasn't just a cry for help. It was proof that someone in this galaxy still believed innocent lives were worth saving, regardless of profit margins or political convenience. The implications hit Veltar like a meteor strike. You've been waiting. All this time you've been waiting for the galaxy to prove it was ready for your kind of justice.
Exactly.
Hayes turned back to the viewport, where the last of the criminal stations was collapsing into debris. And now that we're here, we're not going back into quarantine. The hunting season has officially begun. In the depths of space, encrypted, communications crackled between criminal organizations across the galaxy, their leaders finally understanding what they were truly facing. The humans hadn't just escaped their quarantine, they had transformed it into a preparation period, spending 8 decades building the most efficient, Military machine in galactic history, and now they were using it to hunt down every monster that had ever thought themselves safely beyond the reach of justice. The Great Assembly Hall of the Galactic Council had witnessed many historic moments over its 3,000-year existence, but nothing quite like the chaos erupting across its vast amphitheater today. Representatives from over 500 species filled the tiered seating, their voices creating a cacophony that the translation system struggled to process. Fear battled gratitude in 100 different languages as the galaxy grappled with a question that would reshape interstellar civilization. What do you do when the monsters you locked away turn out to be the heroes you desperately needed? Captain Veltar stood at the central podium, her scaled hands gripping the edges as she faced the most powerful political assembly in known space. 3 months ago, she'd been a simple colony administrator overseeing mining operations and scientific research. Today, she was speaking for every innocent life the humans had saved during their unprecedented campaign against galactic crime. Honorable delegates, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics, stand before you as someone who has seen both the worst and the best that this galaxy has to offer. The worst came in the form of the Crimson Reapers, who slaughtered my colonists like livestock and planned to sell our organs on the black market. Our children would have been trafficked to the core worlds as slaves, our scientists murdered for sport. The chamber fell silent except for the soft hum of life support systems. Every being present understood the implications if it could happen to Colony Alpha 9. It could happen anywhere in the ungoverned sectors that made up nearly 40% of galactic space. But I also witnessed the best, Veltar continued, her voice growing stronger. When we sent our desperate cry for help, expecting silence, the humans answered, not with negotiations or diplomatic protests, but with 37 warships and the absolute commitment to save lives they had never met. They didn't just rescue us, they dismantled an entire criminal empire that had operated with impunity for generations. Senator Crick's volume of the hegemony rose from his designated section, his forearms gesticulating wildly as his translator struggled to keep pace with his rapid speech. The senator was old-school political establishment, the kind. A being who believed stability came from maintaining the status quo, no matter how ugly that status quo might be. Captain Veltar, he said, his voice dripping with the condescension that had made him famous across diplomatic circles. While we all sympathize with your ordeal, we cannot ignore the fundamental issue at hand. These Deathworlders violated an 80-year quarantine. They deployed military force across sovereign space without authorization from any legitimate government. This is exactly the kind of uncontrolled aggression that made quarantine necessary in the first place. The senator slammed his primary manipulator on the podium with enough force to make the sound system squeal feedback.
No.
Deathworlders cannot be trusted with military power. History has proven this time and again.
No.
Give them weapons and they will use them, regardless of the consequences to galactic stability. Veltar waited for the murmur of agreement from the establishment delegates to die down before she responded. When she did, her words carried the weight of absolute truth backed by irrefutable data. Senator, you speak of trust and stability, and perhaps you can explain this. She activated the chamber's central holographic display, which immediately filled with statistical data that made several delegates gasp audibly. These are crime statistics from the past 3 months, compiled by your own Galactic Trade Commission. Numbers hung in the air like accusations. Piracy incidents down 82%. Slave trafficking down 91%. Civilian casualties from criminal activity down 76%. For the first time in living memory, merchant vessels were traveling the outer rim without military escorts. For the first time in my lifetime, Veltar said, letting the data speak for itself, civilian ships can travel the frontier without expecting death or enslavement. Colonies that lived in constant fear now sleep peacefully. Tell me, Senator, which represents true stability, your carefully maintained status quo that sacrificed thousands of lives annually, or the peace that human intervention has brought. Chamber erupted as delegates began shouting over each other, some demanding order, others calling for immediate votes. still others questioning the validity of the data. In the midst of the chaos, Admiral Rebecca Hayes sat perfectly still at the human delegation table, her expression unreadable as she watched the galaxy debate humanity's fate. She could have spoken up, could have defended her species with the same passion that Captain Veltar displayed. Instead, she chose to let their actions speak for themselves. At this very moment, Colonel Anderson was liberating the slave markets of Proxima Station, freeing beings who had given up hope of ever seeing their homeworlds again. Captain Morrison was hunting weapon smugglers in the Centauri cluster, dismantling supply chains that had armed terrorist organizations for decades. The humans weren't asking for permission to do what was right. They were simply doing it, one rescued life at a time. The debate raged for 6 hours. Delegates presenting arguments that ranged from pragmatic concerns about military balance to philosophical questions about the nature of justice itself. Some species that had benefited from human intervention spoke passionately in their favor, while others worried about the precedent of allowing any single species to act as galactic police. But the most compelling testimony came from an unexpected source: former slaves who had been rescued from criminal operations. They spoke in halting voices about years of suffering, about watching friends die, about the moment when armored humans had broken down their cell doors and told them they were free. One young Arcturian, barely more than a child by his species standards, stepped to the podium and said simply, "The humans gave me back my name. The slavers called me Property 774 for 3 years. The human soldier who freed me asked what my real name was, and when I told him, he smiled and said it was a good name. That's all I needed to know about humans." Finally, after hours of debate, Council Speaker Thananine called for order. "The motion before us is clear. Shall we lift the quarantine on Sector Terran 1 and formally invite humanity to join galactic civilization as a recognized member species?" The vote was conducted in absolute silence, each delegate's choice recorded. By quantum encryption that made fraud impossible, the numbers appeared on the massive display: 347 votes in favor, 156 against, 23 abstentions. Admiral Hayes stood slowly, her movement creating a ripple of attention throughout the chamber. She looked remarkably calm for someone whose entire species' future had just been decided by beings who had feared them for 8 decades. "The human species accepts your invitation with gratitude and humility," she said, her voice carrying clearly. "Without amplification, we pledge to use our strength in service of peace, our technology in service of progress, and our military capabilities in service of those who cannot protect themselves." A delegate from the Outer Rim worlds, a species having benefited greatly from human protection, called out Admiral Hayes. "What guarantee can you give us that humans won't eventually turn their weapons against the innocent?" "How do we know?" "You won't become the very tyrants you've been fighting." The question hung in the air like a challenge, and every being in the chamber waited for humanity's response. Admiral Hayes smiled, not the sharp, predatory expression she wore in combat, but something warmer and infinitely more dangerous to humanity's enemies. "You have our word," she said simply. "And if that's not enough, I invite you to consider this. We could have taken whatever we wanted from this galaxy. Our fleets could have conquered any system, enslaved any population, seized any resources we desired. Instead, when we heard a cry for help from strangers, we chose to risk everything to answer it." She gestured to the display still showing crime statistics, freed slaves, and secured trade routes. "We had the power to become conquerors. We chose to become protectors instead. That choice, more than any treaty or guarantee, should tell you everything you need to know about human intentions." As the implications of her words sank in, delegates across the chamber began to understand the true magnitude of what had just occurred. The galaxy hadn't just gained a new member species, it had acquired guardians, who possessed both the power to destroy civilizations and the moral foundation to protect them instead. But in the depths of space, in sectors still marked as too dangerous to patrol, something else was stirring. Criminal organizations that had survived the human campaign were adapting, evolving, preparing for a war unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The real test of humanity's commitment to peace was just beginning. Exactly 1 year, 4 months, and 16 days after the Galactic Council had voted to lift humanity's quarantine, Captain Veltar stood on the bridge of her own command vessel, watching the impossible become routine. The new dawn hummed around, her with the quiet efficiency of a ship built by 3 different species. Working toward a common goal, her hull was Valkyrie biometal that could self-repair, her engines were human fusion drives that could outrun anything in known space, and her weapon systems were hegemony plasma, cannons that could crack asteroids in half. But the real miracle wasn't the technology. It was the crew. Lieutenant Tom Wilson, a stocky human from the Chicago colonies, worked seamlessly alongside Subcommander Cathara, whose tentacled form allowed her to operate 6 different tactical stations simultaneously. Chief Engineer Martinez shared actual Earth coffee with Valkyrie. Technicians who had learned to appreciate the bitter human beverage during late-night repair sessions. The bridge crew spoke 3 languages fluidly, switching between them without conscious thought as they performed their duties with the precision of a single organism. "Captain, we're receiving a distress beacon," Wilson reported, his voice carrying the calm professionalism that had become the standard for the Joint Galactic Defense Force. "Mining colony, Theta 7, in the Perseus Arm. They're reporting hostile contacts and requesting immediate assistance." Veltar felt her 3 hearts synchronize a biological response her species displayed during moments of intense focus. A year ago, she would have been helpless to respond to such a call. Her people were scientists and engineers, not warriors. They would have forwarded the distress signal to the Galactic Patrol and hoped for the best, knowing that the best usually meant a memorial service for the colonists 6 months later. Today was different. Today she commanded a ship designed for one purpose: ensuring that no innocent being ever had to die alone and afraid. While help sat just a few hyperspace jumps away, distance and time to target. 4.7 light-years, ma'am. We can be there in 38 minutes at maximum burn. Signal Admiral Hayes' task force and coordinate our approach vector. Get me a tactical assessment of the threat. Veltar turned to her communications officer, a young hegemony female whose 4 arms allowed her to manage multiple frequencies simultaneously. "Open a channel to Colony Theta 7. The main screen flickered to life, revealing the terrified face of a Centaurian mine supervisor, his normally blue skin pale with fear. Behind him, Veltar could see the chaotic interior of a mining station under attacks, parks flying from damaged systems, beings running past carrying wounded on improvised stretchers, the unmistakable sound of hull breaches being sealed with emergency foam. "This is Captain Veltar of the GDF vessel New Dawn. We've received your distress call and are en route with a full response fleet. Hold your position and keep your people in the emergency shelters." The supervisor's expression shifted from despair to something that might have been hope. "Captain, there are 47 raider ships out there. They're demanding we surrender our deuterium reserves and they want us to hand over our children as payment for safe passage." Veltar felt something cold and hard settle in her chest, that same feeling she'd experienced when the Crimson Reapers had attacked her own colony. The raiders weren't just after resources anymore. They were testing the new order, seeing if the galaxy's newly found backbone would hold under pressure. It was time to provide an answer. "Wilson, what's our tactical situation?" 47 contacts. "Confirmed, ma'am." "Mixed Raider Coalition looks like survivors from the groups that scattered after our anti-piracy campaigns. They're flying modified cargo haulers. Nothing that can match our firepower or speed." Veltar's smile revealed rows of sharp teeth that her ancestors had once used to tear apart prey in their homeworld's ancient oceans. Funny how evolution had prepared her species for moments like this without them ever realizing it. "Patch me through to the raider fleet on all frequencies," she ordered, her voice carrying a new edge that would have surprised the frightened colony administrator she'd been just over a year ago. "And prep a message torpedo with our tactical response plan. I want Admiral Hayes to know exactly what these animals are demanding." The communication channel crackled open, filled with the harsh voices of beings who had chosen to make their living from other people's suffering. Their leader, a scarred Regulan with cybernetic implants covering half his face, appeared on screen with the kind of arrogant smirk that had once made civilized species look the other way. "Unknown vessel, you are interfering with a legitimate salvage operation. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." Veltar studied the raider captain for a moment, Noting the slave brands visible on several beings in the background, the military-grade weapons that could only have come from black market dealers, the casual brutality in their leader's expression that spoke of countless atrocities committed without consequence. This is Captain Veltar of the Galactic Defense Force. You have exactly 10 seconds to power down your weapons and prepare for boarding. Any hostile action will be met with overwhelming force. The Raider's laugh was ugly and contemptuous.
One.
Ship against 47. You're either insane or suicidal. Alien.
Glee.
Veltar replied conversationally. I'm educated. You see, humans taught me something very important during the past. Your predators only remain dangerous until they encounter something higher up the food chain. Her weapons officer, a human marine cross-trained in shipboard combat, looked up from his console with a grin that would have made his drill instructors proud. All systems armed and ready, Captain. Just give the word. Act. 10 seconds have elapsed. Veltar announced calmly. You chose poorly. The New Dawn opened fire with the coordinated precision of a surgical strike team. Her plasma cannons disabled the Raider flagship's engines in the first salvo, while her torpedo spread targeted the vessels threatening the colony most directly. Within minutes, Admiral Hayes' task force dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation. Their arrival coordinated to create a tactical vice that left the Raiders with nowhere to run. The battle, if it could even be called that, lasted exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds, as the last Raider vessel surrendered. Velta found herself thinking about the memorial wall in the Galactic Council chambers, a simple black granite monument, inscribed with thousands of names, beings who had died in attacks just like this one, before the galaxy had found the courage to fight back against the monsters that lurked in the dark. Between stars, her communicator chimed with an incoming message from Admiral Hayes. Outstanding work, Captain. Another sector secure. How are the colonists? 17 wounded. No fatalities. The Raiders will face tribunal within the week. Veltar paused, watching her crew efficiently coordinate rescue operations with the colony's emergency services. Admiral, what's our next assignment? Distress beacon from the Centauri cluster. Long-range sensors suggest a slave trading operation. His voice carried the steel that had made her legendary throughout human space. Looks like some people haven't gotten the message yet. Veltar's expression hardened into something that would have terrified the colony administrator she'd once been. Understood, Admiral? The New Dawn is responding immediately. As her ship and a dozen human vessels jumped to hyperspace, she reflected on how completely everything had changed. The galaxy was no longer a place where strength meant the right to prey on weakness, where distance meant safety for criminals, where good beings had to choose between profit and conscience. Trade routes that had been death traps for generations now ran clean and safe. Colonies in the frontier sectors grew and prospered without fear. Children played in parks on worlds that had once huddled behind defensive shields, waiting for the next attack. But perhaps most importantly, when someone cried out for help in the darkness, they could count on an answer. Not bureaucratic delays or political calculations, but ships and warriors who understood that some things were worth fighting for. Regardless of the cost, the memorial wall in the council chambers had gained a new inscription during the past year. Words that had become humanity's promise to the galaxy and its rallying cry for every being who chose to stand against the darkness. Asterisk, never again. Not on our watch. As the New Dawn asterisk streaked through hyperspace toward another desperate cry for help, Captain Veltar smiled. The age of Deathworld Guardians had begun, and the galaxy was finally learning what it meant to be truly safe. The end.